Thank you, Trip. I didn't know I was that interesting. I almost didn't make it here today. I was coming down I-10 and going through the litany of Get Gordon signs when all of a sudden I saw a billboard with my face on it. Note to the Rotary Club, please tell your guests that they're going to put them on the billboard before they get here. Okay, so I picked bad colors here, but I originally was going to come here and talk about the kid, but the recent Titan disaster caused me to change my presentation a bit, and I'm going to spend a bit more time talking about what it's like to be in a deep sea submersible. So this says Titanic to Johnston to Kidd, from the Hadal Deep, which is the deepest areas of the ocean named after Hades, god of the underworld, to Baton Rouge. So basically I went from hell to Baton Rouge. Tripp gave a little introduction of me. I threw this up here, pictures of what he just said. I started out enlisted aboard submarines, got an appointment to the Naval Academy, decided I didn't want to go submarines, went aviation. Turned in my wings after Top Gun turned the whole aviation community into a bunch of big-headed jerks, and went amphibs, where I was probably the most notable thing in my career was stopping a war from ever happening. Have you ever heard of Saddam Hussein's second attempted invasion of Kuwait? No, you didn't, because we stopped it. After retiring from the Navy, I went to work. Well, I went to work for Hughes Aircraft, which was bought by Raytheon. From Raytheon to Lockheed Martin to Moog Aircraft, and then to General Atomics. You'll see those up there. The one on the left, I'm teaching a kid about the F-35 cockpit during a demonstration there. And then on the right, the last job I had before I came here, working on the MQ-9 Reaper unmanned aircraft for General Atomics. This is what I did for a paycheck. This is how I paid my bills and raised my family. Everything that Tripp talked about on deep sea exploration, working with James Cameron, all that was all my hobby. That was all gratis work, never got paid for it. Stuff I did in my spare time. But, again, it was elements from each of these that gave me the tools that I needed to be the executive director of the USS Kidd Veterans Museum. I learned, obviously, the Navy, that's nothing need be said about that. But from the aerospace industry, which I found to be soul-crushing, by the way. All I really did was paperwork. It looks glamorous, but it's a lot of paperwork. But I did learn management techniques, which I've applied here. But really what led me here was my deep sea diving. I managed to, by a series of accidents, come to James Cameron's attention after his movie, the 1997 Titanic movie, was made. And with the success of that, James decided to go into his passion for deep sea exploration. He had the means to do it, and so he did a series of expeditions after the movie to fully explore the Titanic wreck. I happened to pop up on his radar at the same time that the internet became a thing. So it was a series of happy circumstances. People ask me nowadays, what do I need to study to get into deep sea ocean? I fell into it. I'm sorry, I can't help you. I didn't study this in college. I had no preparation for it. It's just that I had a sense of the history, and I was able to put things together for him that Jim found helpful in surveying and exploring the wreck. So in 2005, my first dives into the deep sea was aboard the Mir 1. This is a rated submersible tested down to 6,000 meters. It is owned and operated by the Russians, but at the time, that was the best vehicle available to routinely visit the Titanic wreck. The Russians, after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, were trying to get money wherever they could. And so these submersibles were built for Russia's oil and gas industry, and they quickly found commercial gold by holding charters to the Titanic wreck. And what you'll see, does this thing? Yeah, it does. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to point out a couple of things because again, I want to teach you a little bit about how submersibles work, and it'll give you a little bit of understanding of the background of how the Titan submersible thing happened. Even though it looks like a big bloated fish here, at the heart of it is a titanium sphere. And when you go down into the pressures of the deep, pressure is going to act on you from all different directions. You cannot give pressure a weak spot or it will take it and it will kill you. So the ideal form in that situation is a sphere. And you want to build it with the strongest metal on earth, titanium. It's heavy, but it's in a truly Russian way, it works. There's the pressure sphere there outside of the fairing. That's what it looks like, and you'll have 3 operators in there. The rest of this is unpressurized. In other words, the sea will flood into this area, and it will be equalized with the pressures of the deep. Only inside this sphere here is there an environment that you take down with you. This is not scuba diving, where your body is subjected to the pressures where you go down a few hundred feet. This is deep sea diving where you have to have a container strong enough to hold your atmosphere all the way down and come back all the way up in one piece. You'll add a bunch of other stuff here. You'll have little remotely operated vehicles called ROVs or bots that it's in a little, carry down a little cage here on the front of the submersible, and with a tether you will control that thing inside the wreck of Titanic, which Cameron is the only one who has thoroughly explored the interior of Titanic. So I went down there, and I had I didn't take very good pictures because our dive was cut short, which I'll get into in a minute. But a couple of things that were interesting to me. In the movie, they showed First Officer Murdoch, the deck officer who was at the con of Titanic when she hit the iceberg, showed him committing suicide. I always push back on that. We did have eyewitness testimony of the second officer, Lightoller, who was the senior surviving officer for Titanic, who saw Murdoch at the end. But a lot of historians don't believe Murdoch, don't believe Lightoller. They think that he told people what they wanted to hear. And in this case, he was telling the widow of Murdoch something that she wanted to hear, that her husband died bravely. Well, I was looking for physical evidence to corroborate Lightoller's story, and I found it in these, I found it in these 2 items right here. This is a #1 lifeboat davit. It's the only davit that's in a retracted position, which means it was the only one that was trying to launch a lifeboat at the end. Once they launched them, they extended, and then they were left in that position. And every other lifeboat davit, either still on the wreck or in the debris field, fallen off the wreck, they're all in the extended position. But this is a retracted position, which meant that they were trying to load a boat in the end when the water overtook them, and that's exactly what Lightoller explained happened. And then he also had the story that right when that water overtook that lifeboat station, which Murdoch was the duty officer on and coordinating it, Lightoller went down, the ship took a big dip, and Lightoller was sucked against a grate and brought down with it, went down a certain number of feet when a blast of hot air from inside came up and pushed him off. So that's the grate that he said, and it is bowed outward as though there was an explosion underneath. So I was very interested in those 2 objects. Diving on Titanic in the mirrors, you always dove as a set of 2. I was in mirror 1. This is mirror 2, shining her lights on a portion of the officer's deck house, and that's 3rd Officer Pittman's window. He left it open for some reason, but that didn't cause the sinking of the ship because by that time, she was already gone. That was probably the best picture I took in 2005. But then things went south on us. We lost hydraulics, and it was a little concerning at first. So we had to set down. This picture is taken from mirror 2. I'm in mirror 1 here, and we are set down on the port side of the boat deck while mirror 2 came over and checked us out. And that's me looking at mirror 2 through my viewport. This is my view while they were doing all that. I'm looking at the officer's deck house. This is stateroom Z, stateroom Y, and beyond that's a Marconi room, which was my particular expertise that originally brought me to the attention of Jim Cameron. So I was in the perfect place to be, right outside my favorite place on the ship, hoping I didn't die. It turned out to be, it wasn't on a life-threatening system. We lost hydraulics to the manipulator arms, so the Russian pilot who didn't know I understood Russian, and then I understood that he didn't like Americans, he cut off the dive, and we came back to the surface. So I was only about an hour and a half on Titanic for that first dive, but that was at 3,800 meters. That I considered to be a real deep dive, which later I would find out would be mistaken. Next, I would go in the Pisces 5 submersible, which was run by the University of Hawaii's Hawaii Undersea Research Laboratory. Again, a lot of stuff around here, and even though this looks like portholes up here, this is not really a conning tower. This is a pressure sphere. Again, just like I mentioned with the Mir, at the heart of each of these submersibles is a cylindrical pressure chamber made out of titanium. And we were going out to try and find one of the last, there were 5 midget subs, they call them midget subs, and I guess we're going to have to eventually get rid of that name because it's fastly becoming un-PC, special attack submarines that the Japanese deployed on the morning of Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, before the aerial attack. And they tried to get into the harbor. One of them, if you saw Tora Tora Tora, you saw the one midget sub was sighted on the way in and was sunk by a destroyer, the USS Ward. And the others had certain fates. Another one never got in the harbor, floated around to the western end of the island, and was captured, and that became POW number 1, the skipper of that sub, and that sub is on display at Fredericksburg, Texas, in the Nimitz Museum. But one was missing out of the 5. One was nobody knew what happened to her, and we were after her. Well, we found her. This was her. She was cut up into 3 pieces. She was dumped by the Navy outside the harbor. Don't know why. There's no paperwork on it. We're still trying to look into it. But we found that sub. We also found that her torpedo tubes were empty. And as I've backtracked through the history and everything, I'm prepared to make the assessment, so I need to write a book whenever I get time, to say that that sub is torpedoed the USS Oklahoma inside the harbor and is the reason why the USS Oklahoma capsized. Probably the second most iconic moment of the Pearl Harbor attack after the explosion of the USS Arizona. I won't get into that today. Maybe I'll come back and talk about that on another day. So then, the limiting factor was built. A guy named Victor Vescovo, an ex-Navy officer, intelligence officer, who made a fortune in equities. Very adventurous guy. He climbed all the peaks, all the top mountain ranges. Then he wanted to dive all the deeps in the ocean. So he had designed, commissioned, and built the Western world's first full ocean depth submersible, meaning it is rated to as deep as you can go in the ocean. In this case, the deepest you can go in the ocean is 11,000 meters, and this full ocean depth submersible can go that depth. And it's been tested in Russia, because they're the only ones with a machine big enough to test something like this. It's been tested to that depth plus a comfortable safety margin. So it is rated as a full ocean depth submersible. There's only one other manned full ocean depth submersible in the world today. It's owned by the Chinese government. Victor got a hold of me and said, I'm going to test my full ocean depth submersible on the Titanic because it's a shallow wreck. Shallow wreck, 3,800 meters? Okay, he needed a guide. So I went with him to Titanic in the limiting factor. There's that davit again. We had a lot of current that day. We spent most of our time trying not to hit the wreck. And there's a lot of particulates in the water, so my pictures aren't that great. The best pictures I have are the ones, he had a down-looking porthole, just looked straight down, and I got my clearest pictures down here. That's the bow of Titanic. That's the starboard side that we're trying not to hit there as we're being pushed along the length down the side. Out in the debris field, this is a piece of the Titanic's double bottom. It's torn loose and upside down. You can still see the red paint on it. And this was something that the production company was interested in, the remains of Benjamin Guggenheim's stateroom. That's not really it, but it's the shell plating that was outside his stateroom, so they called that a win and made a big deal in a documentary about it. To me, it was very, forensically, it's unimportant. So, Victor, after having come off Titanic and after he did his 5 deeps, he explored all the 5 deeps, he wanted to continue diving in the deeps, and he was saying, I'm going out to the Pacific, are there any wrecks out there? I said, we need to find the USS Johnston. Johnston is known for, there's a popular book called The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's a history book about the Battle off Samar that was fought in October of 1944. General MacArthur was going to go in and retake the Philippines. If he did that, he was going to sever the Japanese logistics line, their resources, their raw resources in Southeast Asia and the Japanese home islands where their war machine was being built. So they couldn't have it. So they made a big stand there to try and disrupt MacArthur's invasion. And a little destroyer, well, more than one destroyer, but the Johnston was the example of them all, went full tilt at the world's greatest battleship that's ever been built, the Japanese battleship Yamato. And that little Fletcher-class destroyer took on Yamato. She got smacked by Yamato and would end up breaking in half because of it. Her 5-inch guns against Yamato's 18-inch guns, biggest guns ever put on a naval vessel. And but she turned the Japanese around, and they were unsuccessful in interdicting MacArthur. So I knew that Johnston had sunk in the Philippine Sea. Victor wanted to go to the Philippine Trench, one of the deepest trenches out there, and so let's go look for the Johnston. It'll be an adjunct to his exploration of the Philippine Deep. The Emden Deep is what it was called, but it was first measured by the Germans back in World War I. But anyway, a debris trail had been found out there by a group called Vulcan. And that was a group funded by Paul Allen of Microsoft fame. And they went around and they did an amazing job of finding a number of shipwrecks. But this was a little too deep for Vulcan. Vulcan had found some debris and they weren't really sure what they had. They knew it was a Fletcher-class destroyer, but they didn't know which one. Because on the day that Johnston sank, her sister ship, another Fletcher-class, the Hull sank, USS Hull, and a small destroyer escort called the Samuel B. Roberts. Again, all of these guys went against a Japanese fleet of 4 battleships, 6 cruisers, and 11 destroyers and turned them back. So we didn't know if they found Johnston. First thing to check was this piece of debris right here. We weren't really sure what it was. I wasn't sure what it was. But in the middle of COVID, Victor and I came out here to Baton Rouge to study the Kidd, which is the only destroyer in the world still in her World War II configuration. And this was a sister ship of Johnston. So I wanted to study her inside out because looking at this, I had no idea what condition the wreck would be in. So I had to know it inside out. I couldn't just look at photographs and say, oh yeah, that's what she looks like. I had to know what it looked like so I'd be able to identify something. And I got down in the emergency steering room of Kidd, and I know it doesn't really make a direct correlation here, but I could see things like this hydraulic ram is bent in a U right here. There's the hydraulic cylinders. There was just other details that told me, okay, that's the emergency steering room of a Fletcher-class destroyer. But is it Johnston or is it Hull? Another thing that Vulcan found was this remains of a 5-inch gun mount with a handling room. It's upside down. The gun is down here, buried in the sand. And I noticed this beam right here, that unusual shaped beam. There's only one aboard Kidd like it. And it's aft of her number 4 mount. And if that means that's her number 4 mount, we knew from the history that a Japanese shell hit USS Hull's number 4 gun and broke it in half, and this one's intact, so ergo, this is Johnston. But Victor was, he was encouraged by this. We had this big ocean. His limiting factor submersible is very good, but it doesn't have any search capability. So basically it was my job to put him right over this very small needle in this very big haystack. Using a plot created by the supporting ship's echo sounder, we had this map, and basically it was a matter of me taking a little bit of historical information, getting down to the area that I thought she was, then closing my eyes and taking my finger, put on a map and said, let's dive here. We did, and we found her. This is Johnston. Victor always says, yeah, I think, okay, Parks, you're probably right. We probably did find Johnston, but I'm not going to rest until we find the hull number on her bow. He was shocked when this the prow of this came out of the darkness, and there's her number, just as freshly painted as when she went down. By the way, this is this is from the Subs 4K camera. The 4K camera couldn't deal with the absolute blackness down there. The software kept trying to compensate for it, sent the shutter speed down, so the pictures are not that absolute. My iPhone took better pictures. iPhone, 4K camera, 4K camera. If you go aboard the Kidd, you will recognize all these areas. That's the bridge area on the starboard side, the forward 20 millimeter mount. There's Mount 51 up on the bow. She's pointed outward. Mount 52 with a big shell hole in the middle of it. They're 40 millimeter on the, that's the same one there. Like I said, when I give tours on the Kidd, I actually give tours of two ships at the same time. So if you ever come to the Kidd Museum, ask to see if I'm there and ask for a tour, because I give a tour not only of Kidd but of Johnston too, because I know from my analysis of this wreck what happened and where. I tried all the survivor accounts in. I counted all the shell holes and everything, and pieced it all together so that I can say, okay, this is Kidd, and now this is Johnston. I've got the ship. I've got the story of a ship that survived a kamikaze attack. I have a story of a ship that went down fighting and was lost in the end. Again, more. This is the port side of the bridge where the commander, Commander Evans, commanding officer of USS Johnston, USS Johnston, was injured from a salvo from the Yamato. And this is one of her 40 millimeter guns, and this is her mission. It's kind of hard to piece it out. That's why I made a CG model. That's what Johnston looked like, and if you know what the Kidd looks like, you'll see it's a very familiar looking shape. And then this is the wreck we found, upright, buried up to a water line. Her gun's trained out. She still looks fierce. She's missing her, like, the aft third of the vessel, but and that kind of explains the debris field that we found. But so that is my is the preparation I had there. So on these various dives, I had an issue in the mirror, but luckily it was fixed. But we never suffered any integrity problems. In the Pisces, we only went down 380 meters. That's not very taxing, and it was an okay dive. Diving on Titanic again in 2019, we were buffeted around a lot by currents that day. Our biggest danger was being thrust into the wreck, and you don't want that to happen because you don't know what that'll do to your pressure container. You don't know how much on the line you may be integrity-wise if you have a fender bender down there in the deep. And then Johnston. Now Johnston, everybody asks me, what's it like to be on Titanic? Oh, it's Titanic, To me, I'm the technical advisor. When I'm down there, I'm in data acquisition mode. I really don't feel emotion when I'm down there at the wreck. My eyes are out. I'm recording everything that I can, and I don't have time to feel all the romanticism and everything that Titanic evokes. But Johnston was different. For some reason, in a way I cannot explain, it really got to me. And it was the Johnston dive that put me here in Baton Rouge today. I had gone out to Kidd to study her prior to this dive. I came back a couple of times to film documentaries aboard, but I just knew that I needed to take care of this, the sister ship of Johnston. I need to preserve this history and get that story out to people, which we're going to do with the museum over time. I'm going to have exhibits that are going to be more centric on this action and what they did during that time that really helped win the war for us. But like I said, I played It's Been a Long, Long Time by Harry James Orchestra. When we left the wreck, I was hoping the wreck would hear it, as funny as that sounds, because sound does transmit through the steel of the submersible through the water. If there were any ghosts aboard, I hope they appreciated it. And now every time I hear it on the radio, it takes me right back to that dive and those images of that ship down there in the deep, looking like she's still in the fight. Another thing that I noticed in the deep, and I'll bring it up here because I've come to learn that Louisiana is an energy state. The imagery that we brought back from Johnston, it was amazing. The scars that she left in the ocean floor when she hit the bottom were just as fresh looking as if they had been made yesterday. There was no sediment, there's no corrosion, there's no oxygen down there. It was untouched, it was a time capsule. But we had a Hadel scientist aboard who looked at this, and he studied our imagery very closely, and he wrote a paper. He's at the University of Wellington in New Zealand, probably the world's most foreknown scientist from the deep ocean. And he basically made the case that in the deep ocean, the ocean bottom does not heal, at least not in a human timeline. Here it is 80 years later, and Johnston looked like she just hit bottom yesterday. It hasn't filled over, the tears up in the ocean haven't. This is important because we are driving toward an energy future that is dependent upon new technologies, a lot of rare earth minerals and elements. Terrestrial sources, China has about 90% of them locked up, either under direct control or over some kind of control. And even they're seeing that it's not enough for their expected development of the technologies and their expansion. There's a lot of that stuff down in the deep. There's abyssal plains where there are just nuggets of manganese and cobalt and lithium just lying. All you have to do is pick it up, like one of these harvesters from the Dune movie. If we do that and the ocean floor doesn't heal itself, I mean, you can extrapolate and see there's damage we could do to the ocean ecosystem. And everybody's talking about automobile exhaust and what we're doing to the atmosphere, CO2 emissions. If we destroy the ocean ecosystem, we're going to do way more damage to the atmosphere than any nation of automobiles or whatever is going to do. So I understand that Bob Ballard spoke earlier, and he also talked about the future of the deep. I saw it down there. It just all came as an epiphany when I was down there, how desolate it is. But knowing that the Chinese have a full ocean depth submersible, knowing that the Russians and the Japanese and the Indians and a few other nations are aggressively seeking full ocean depth technology, if not manned submersibles, then remotely operated vehicles, it can only be for one purpose, and that's exploitation of the deep. So I see. And that's just the resource side of it. I won't even get into the military side of it. Seabed warfare is something that the Navy is only just now starting to explore. The deeper you go, the more advantage you have. It's like the opposite of having the high ground. You want to go for the low ground. So I'm just putting that message out to all who would want to hear that and see how they might want to be involved with it. But I definitely see our future, our energy needs lie in the deep. So the safer that we can explore the deep, the better off we are. And at that point, I will take questions. Yes, sir. Okay. 5 minutes.
When is the kid going into dry dock?
Okay. I didn't mention that. Okay, so you guys for the last 40 years have seen the kid as a permanent feature down on the riverfront. Next year, river permitting, she'll be gone. She's going down to New Orleans for a much-needed overhaul period. It's 60 years since her last overhaul, when she was still in the Navy. The Department of Interior standards for museum ships is they should have overhauls every 10 years. So she's due, and she's had damage from her cradle. Her hull's in pretty good condition, despite what a lot of people on Facebook will say. And we can't fix it while the river's down, because why do shipyard work on an unstable riverbed when you can take it to a shipyard? So if the river rises high enough next year to us to get out of the cradle, we're going down to New Orleans. We'll have to wait for the river to rise again to come back. So there's going to be a big blank spot on the riverfront for the next year. And we're we're trying to get together all the projects that we want to do on this once-in-a-generation thing so that she doesn't have to leave again for another 40 to 60 years. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So the Titanic, that is how many miles? I'm not a meters person, miles down.
Titanic's about 2.5 miles down.
So how long does it take you to get down to that depth? How much time?
Well, different submersibles go at different rates. The Mears would take 3 hours to get down. In the limiting factor, we got down there short of an hour and a half. It's different technologies and different ways of ballasting. You know, it goes all in that equation. But it takes a while. I usually take a nap on the way down. There's nothing to see. It's all black down there. Yes, and all these, you know, you see all these deep sea fluorescent creatures and krakens and stuff like that. I didn't see any of that stuff. If there's a kraken in the deep, no, there's no kraken in the deep. There's nothing for a kraken to eat. There's nothing down there in where Johnston is, nothing. So
Maybe because it's a sphere, it's its own sphere, you're not having to deal with the bends.
No.
On your body, it's all.
no, we take our atmosphere down with us and we come back with it. So you don't want to eat beans before you go. So, yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
The recent incident where they had the one that broke up,
Pipe.
had it been down a few times before, and was it through a recent crack, or what happened?
Well, okay, so I can't speak officially about it because I'm not a member of OceanGate, the company that ran the Titan. I was approached by Titan years ago to be their Titanic guy, and I looked at their design and said, no, I'm not, I have concerns about this. I've been told not to use the words death trap because that could make me liable. No, I had concerns. Thank you, Trey Schmaltz. It was a cylinder, and it was a carbon fiber hull with titanium end caps glued on. So not only was it, because you can't drill into carbon fiber, so they had to glue it on. And I don't think the glue failed. I don't think that part of the design, my problem with, the reason why I turned down OceanGate's invitation to join their company is because I firmly believe what I told all of you. The best shape for a pressure chamber is a sphere, and it should be made of the same material throughout, in this case titanium. He was putting together a cylinder because his business model was to take as many people, paying passengers down. They call them mission specialists, but that was a tax dodge, or a regulations dodge, I should say, in my opinion. If there's any lawyers out here. I know there are lawyers out here. One brought me here. It was that they had to extend it into a cylinder in order to take as many paying passengers down. That's the whole reason why Titanic, that's why she was so big. She was not a luxury cruise ship, as it's often portrayed. She was an immigrant ship. She was officially classed as an immigrant ship. And the reason why they grew so big during that time is because there was a wave of immigrants coming across the Atlantic, and the shipping companies made the ships bigger and bigger hulls to cram all these immigrants in. And then they put the icing on the cake with the second class business people and the first class, but that's everybody was seized. But really, Titanic was big because they had to try and fit as many people, paying passengers in as possible. Titan was, in my opinion, extended into a cylindrical shape to take as many paying passengers as possible. And we'll wait to see what the forensic evidence is after the investigation, but I fully believe in my own heart that it was that carbon fiber hull, which is, I don't know why, carbon fiber is good with pressure in one direction, but it's not good in the other, and it doesn't flex well. All of these pressure vessels, whether it be a titanium sphere or a carbon fiber hull, when they go down and have the pressure exerted on them, when they come back up and it's released, they flex over a period of time. And that's why you test these things, you rate them to test their ability to resist that flexing, and then you have periodic maintenance. You count how many dives you've done with it, and then you take it out of service and you inspect it. OceanGate didn't do any of that. They didn't even certify their vessel. They failed certification. Now, there's no law saying that they have to be certified to dive. So they said, we're diving. The entire submersible community, everybody I know, begged them, please don't dive unless you get a certification. And Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, said, no, don't tell me my business. We are innovators. We are pushing the edges of the envelope. That's what his excuse was. And I believe, personally believe, I'm not speaking for anybody, this is my personal opinion, I say that for legal purposes, that's why that submersible died. It had been 2 diving seasons before. And as you will see in an upcoming documentary about Titanic, which I am currently working on, we have evidence that she hit Titanic a couple of times in 2022. Now, did that damage her? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. I'll be interested to see forensically if that played a factor. But there is a big scrape that became visible in 2022 that was not there before around the port anchor, which OceanGate filmed very close up, very extensively. When I dove in 2019, we had to maintain, by NOAA restriction, we had to maintain 20 meters away from the wreck at all time. OceanGate's Titan evidently got right up to the port anchor, close enough to film the manufacturer name on the fluke, and made a big deal about it in public media and everything. But then when you review the expedition that followed them, and you see their imagery, you see that the area of the hull around that port anchor is all scraped up. And did that impact the hull? I don't know. And we have no evidence that they did any like full x-ray or examination of the hull fibers to see if they've had any issues. So it's just, Stockton Rush claimed innovation, and she's about to ring the bell.
I'm about to thank you.